Welcome back to the podcast. I recently taped Chuck Patton, who drew JLA Detroit, and I thought it would be fun to bring some people back onto the show to talk about that run of JLA Detroit. This was a time it wasn't called JLA Detroit, but the fans ended up calling it JLA Detroit. It ran basically from 84 through 87. It began right around Justice League Annual number 2 and lasted past Chuck Patton run on it, like 261. It's a controversial period because it saw the classic JLA satellite, which had been around since the early 70s, replaced by a new roster, a lot of newbie people. So you had on Elongated Man, Martian Manhunter, and then these new characters like Gypsy and Vibe and Steel and Vixen. And it sparked a lot of debate among the fans. But over the past couple of decades, it's been a little more beloved 40 years later. So when this happened, and I don't care who pipes in, the three of us are almost like this weird combination of the Three Stooges and Abbott and Costello here. So you never know what's going to be happening. But did you guys, when they did this big switch, did you guys miss the satellite JLA? Or did you think it was a time for a change? Bobby, whichever one you want to put in.
I love the idea of the satellite. I appreciated that they were trying something. I had just started reading the JLA book. It was a big shift. I did appreciate that they were trying something new. They were trying to be a little more hip with it because with Vibe, and they were trying to bring in more cultural what was going on in the world at the time, which I appreciated and I thought worked. And so I like that era. It's not my favorite era of the JLA.
Did you like it back then, or did you grow to like it over time?
I grew to like it. I tolerated it. I just remember going, it's okay. It's not. It felt like they were trying to replicate Teen Titans storytelling, or maybe because I think at that same time frame, the Avengers didn't have the big characters. It was Wasp and Black Knight, and so it felt like they were trying to do some of the same stuff.
According to Chuck Patton, I don't exactly remember, they were trying to replicate the success of the Teen Titans when they were doing this.
It feels like the story beats have a Teen Titans feel.
And now you both can answer this question. The reckoning at the time was they didn't want to use Superman and Wonder Woman and those characters because it would interfere with the continuity. I'm like, but you've been doing that for 15 years, but that was the reasoning. Do you think that was true of where DC was going? Or was that more of a cop-out just to not to use the classic characters?
Go ahead. I always thought it was just an excuse to get rid of them for a while.
I did too. I thought that I read Justice League more so than I read Superman and Wonder Woman comics at the time. That's where I got my Superman and Wonder Woman, was in Justice League. And I remember like right before the JLA Detroit happened was a crossover not a crossover, multi-part thing with the invasion of Martians. And they brought back Martian Manhunter, who I had only seen in my uncle's back issues. Because Martian Manhunter, I think he's the discovery of this time period, because what people like today, he's ubiquitous and has been for decades. But there was a period of 20 years when he just vanished. Like they shuffled. It's kind of with Marvel, Carol Danvers just went away for a long time. And they discovered with John Jones, we've got something that we could do something with. And I think a lot of the newness of JLA Detroit for me was, I remember this guy from my old back issues, and then here he is in this new thing, and he was like the anchor. And I read issue to issue as it was coming out, and I remember going, Aquaman's got a point that these people aren't given and at that point, we didn't know this, continuity-wise, they were trapped on Earth 2 in a storyline that they were going to get to later on. But really, Aquaman said, up yours to everybody who wasn't there.
You got
and said,
that was a good story because he was a charter member. He could disband it, and you guys are not giving your 100% all to the Justice League. Therefore, I'm disbanding it because we can't do what we set out to do. And that was a good plot. That made sense.
yeah. But I remember when he made the declaration that whoever can commit is who's going to stay.
Right.
And I remember going, what's Red Tornado doing? Why is he leaving? Ridiculous.
And mentioning John, he becomes so integral during this period.
Yeah.
That continued afterwards also.
Right, when the Detroit storyline ends, that is the end of this volume of Justice League.
Yeah,
we
the
get
G
the
volume, the original volume.
John is the only leaguer left at the end who goes into the new series, which was the Keith Giffen, J.M. DeMatteis,
Yeah,
the Wahaha years.
Yeah.
And John, the creators on the Detroit made John so, they increased John's awareness so much that launched him into that. He is Mr. Justice League. He became the face of the Justice League.
I remember halfway through, if I'm not mistaken, about halfway through the run, because they centered the new JLA so much around Aquaman's look. We all got to focus. About halfway through, Aquaman leaves. And I think that was external because sales were bad and they brought in Batman to replace him.
They also wrote Aquaman as a jerk.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what was going on at DC, they didn't know what to do with a lot of DC leading up to Crisis, and even like the last 6-7 years of the whole basically from 1980 to about 85, they really didn't know what to do with DC. Now, see, Jerry Conway had been pretty much writing the JLA since 1978, which is actually a good run. Somewhere during this, he did take a break.
Point I was going to make.
Yeah, he did take a break, and Patton indicated that Jerry took a break because he was getting burned out, and then he got rejuvenated and returned. So I'm asking you, because he'd been doing it since 1978 at the time, do you think he should have stayed away and brought in a new writer? Or do you think the overall state of DC at the time, it didn't matter who the heck they brought in, they just kind of like grounded JLA and a lot of the other titles like Flash and they kind of grounded them to the ground. There was just no resurrecting them.
At the time, they didn't have Crisis as an endpoint in mind. But I think usually when you have a full-scale reboot like JLA Detroit, you bring a new writer on. But they didn't change anything. It was whoever was writing it in the one thing just kept on. It was Jerry Conway. And the artist, Chuck Patton, there was no changeover of the guard. It was just Jerry and Chuck Patton did this issue, and now here we are with the new stuff. There was no clean break.
Yeah. But that was kind of comics at the time, though. Comics didn't restart with new number ones every time you changed creative teams. Creative teams just stayed on the book, and you would have changes, and they would just keep going because they were the creative team. I don't know if a different creative team, because it depends on who the creative team would have been.
Of course.
Certain writers write that because the Justice League Detroit era, and this is a very generalization because I do know they fight like a Mazo and Despair. They fight some big things, but a lot of it becomes this ground level, street level thing.
Like there were street punks and somebody who was robbing the neighborhood grocery store.
So we had a lot
something
of
like that.
Yeah, so it was different enough where JLA is, we're not saving planets, we're saving neighborhoods for a while. I don't know if Jerry does a good job here. I don't have any problems with the stories. It was a product of the time it was in, and I don't know if another writer would have done something different. I don't know how much of that was corporate mandated. They've got to do this. How much of it was Jerry going, what I want to do. So I don't know how much of that was the case, because as you guys know, when you do corporate comics, you are at the whim of what corporate wants to do. And sometimes you do things just because they say, you know what would be cool? We should do this. And then you do it. Whereas I don't know if that was the case, or if Jerry Conway goes, hey, guys, I've got an idea. I don't know. I
think a lot of, and again, all I really know is on the page is, wow, they're in Detroit. And I believe it was Detroit because maybe Jerry Conway grew up there.
No, it was the other way
Or
around.
Oh, okay.
They did it because Chuck Patton said, "I'm a native of the Detroit, Michigan
Okay.
area." He goes, in hindsight, maybe we didn't want, he said we didn't want to do LA because of
Right.
what
West
was
Coast
done here,
Avengers.
Avengers, yeah.
but he said we could have done that. He did say him and Jerry collaborated a lot on putting the stuff together, and that Jerry was really making sure that as they created stuff that Patton would get a piece of the royalty creative
Good.
because I thought that was very cool. That comics like we're interesting to characters, and by that time DC was starting to put things in that when you created a character from now on, you're going to get whenever that character appears, you're going to get some kind of piece of the pie. So he was very good with Jerry and Conway.
I love the CW era because they used a
Oh,
lot of characters in the
boy, they
CW
were.
shows.
I was going to get to that. The fact that decades later, most of the JLA Detroit was in live action on a weekly basis on the CW shows. That was bonkers. And the fact that the Vibe character became, what was his name on the Flash? I forget.
Cisco Ramon.
Cisco.
Yeah,
That's
instead
right.
of being Paco Ramon as he was in the comic, he
Yeah.
became Cisco.
But the fact that Vibe went from this kind of a joke to this very cool character portrayed by, and just the whole neat thing. And no one knew. You and me, Bobby, and you, we were watching going, hey, that's the JLA Detroit guy. But nobody had to know that. And it was just like there was a sense of ownership years later with these characters.
That's one of the beautiful things about this current superheroes comic stuff on TV. It's not seeing Spider-Man. It's, oh my God, that's Agnar the Screamer on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes.
Holy crap, that's Firestorm on the Flash.
Yeah.
It's that as old time comic fans. And I'm the same with you as, oh my God, that's Vibe. Oh my God, that's Gypsy. Steel is a major character in Legends of Tomorrow. So I'm geeking out over stuff like that, like I know you were.
Yeah.
And I think what the CW did in updating them, some of certainly like Vibe and Gypsy are written in the comic. They're very stereotypical.
It was, I remember even at the time, and I was 14 or 15 going, are we a few years too late on breakdancing?
About Chuck Patton the same. But Chuck Patton did make a point when I taped him that he said that Vibe was really liked by the Latino community, and they thought that Vibe was their character. And he goes, even now, people talk about the Vibe character and how the Latins really attached themselves to it. I'm not sure exactly because of Vibe from the 80s or the comic thing, but this was Chuck Patton's first big assignment, JLA, and he came up through the New Talent Showcase.
Oh,
he came through the New Talent Showcase, and he told some very cool Dick Giordano stories. It was very funny about the one time he thought he was getting fired because he just whatever, and he gave some really cool Giordano. But again, he was 25 when he did this. It was his first big assignment, and he basically left after this assignment because of the fan negative reaction. He had a very successful career in animation and storyboarding and all that, and he's now retired from all that, and he won an Emmy for Spawn, and we talked about. But keeping in mind he was 25, and it's this big thing. What did you think of Patton as an artist drawing this series?
I enjoyed his art.
Yeah, I was of the mind that George Perez and Jim Aparo were the only good comic book artists at the time. That's how everyone should draw. And Patton, it was like a lighter version of a Perez. The details were there, the intricate costumes, and when you have to create, and I'm assuming Patton had a lot to do with the creation of the headquarters. Headquarters are very important to me I guess they are today still, but when you make a headquarters, you got to get that cutaway with here's what Sub-Basement 4 is. And they did all that stuff with the new Detroit headquarters, and that was my favorite thing. But Patton's good. Yeah, I dug him on this.
Did you like him,
storytelling?
Bobby?
Good storytelling too, because one of the things that we talk about when we're in publishing with artists in comics, and we tell them all the time is your storytelling I need to be able to know what's going on with no words, not the details, but the storytelling. The story needs to move and flow. And I think he did that very well. I had no trouble following the action as he drew it. I think depending on the inker, sometimes his art went up or down depending
He
on the
did
inker.
mention that was one of the problems.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that really bothered him with some of the inking that people did for him.
Yeah, because finding that balance, when you find a penciler and inker that jail, there's a reason those guys work. There's a reason Byrne and Austin work together so much.
Yeah.
There's a reason
Or
George
Byrne
Perez
or Byrne and Keith Williams also
Yeah.
were another good
Or-
mix.
yeah, or that George Perez and Romeo Thangal worked so well for so long. Oh my God, we gel, we work, and we bring out the best in each other. And sometimes you don't get that because when I went back and reread these this week, there are issues where the art looks better than others, and I noticed it's different inkers.
Yeah, okay.
Because the inkers bring out something in the penciler's work, and sometimes the inker can enhance it. Sometimes the inker can simplify it. We've seen examples, not to go too far off topic, but the whole Vince Colletta, like not inking half of what Jack Kirby drew on Thor, is a big one for people. Where
Okay.
Kirby turned in these very intricate pencils, and the inker just, we don't need that.
You just mentioned Vince Colletta, and I forget because I did so many tapings recently on Jack Kirby, and it shows Kirby's character. I think it was Cliff Biggers, but it shows Kirby's character and what he was as a man. Because a lot of these creators, when we talk about them, their human sides get lost and they become these greater than life movie star icons thing. And he said he brought Vince Colletta with him to DC because he didn't think Marvel would give him any work, and he wanted to make sure. Now, again, that's what I believe that Cliff said that. I think
I've heard that. Yeah, I believe I've heard that as well.
And that's why when Kirby went to DC, he said, "Give me your lowest selling title," because he didn't want to take anybody's job away from them. But going back to the JLA, they made some radical shifts. Do you think they could have done some things to make it more palatable and possibly say, did you really have to destroy the JLA satellite? Because you could have had the JLA satellite and then Detroit as the anchor. Do you think it was just baked in that there was no way the fans were ever going to really buy this?
I remember the thing about the destroying the satellite is they destroyed it, and then a few months later they destroyed it again in Crisis. Nobody checked with anybody. Oh, is the satellite still up? And they blew it up again in Crisis, and I was like, "Whoa! I already read that you already blew this up," and that took me out of the ball game. But I let it go 45 years later.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. We get that, Joe. You're sure not mad. Okay, Joe.
Not mad at all.
I've got some nice swampland down in Florida for you, too. I'll give you the
You can't see it, but on the wall to Joe's left, there's a picture of the blown up satellite with darts in it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
One time.
I do think, and I don't know, because comics are made so far in advance.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was always a plan or if it was because of the fans complaining, but we do get Superman. They do come back for a bit, and then Batman joins the team after Aquaman leaves. I don't know if that was a reaction to fans going, or if it was always, we need Batman.
It was interesting because the fan reaction is much different than the fan reaction today, because you didn't have the internet, you didn't have all these websites, you didn't have all these places to whine and complain about things.
It's fun, like in reading back issues of your old single issues, like I've been doing. Letter columns are a mess because the Justice League Detroit letter columns where people just, what the crap is this? And they just printed them because that may be all they had. Wow. We got to fill a letter column.
It's so funny going back and rereading these. I saw, hey, I know that guy.
Yeah, I've seen that
are writing letters to these. I was like, oh, that was a cool thing I didn't remember because I didn't know them when I read these.
Yeah, Bert Busick wrote letters.
Yeah. Barry Reese, who is a writer friend of mine, regular Justice League letter writer. And I was like, so that was cool. That was, or like there was a Bo Smith one in there before Bo was working in comics.
Okay.
And they were pointing out things. Why are we doing this? Would seem to
Why
be a
are
big
we
thing
doing this?
in the letter column was, why is this happening? I don't, it seems out of character. It seems this or that or whatever. But yeah, I applaud them for trying. See, fandom can be fickle. And we see this with comics. We see this with movies and TV
Everything.
show. We're going to get something new. Okay, we want something new. Why can you guys never give us anything new? You retread the same stuff all the time, and the company's like, great, we'll give you something new. Why are you giving us this crap? Why
I
aren't
don't
you
want new
doing
stuff.
yeah, why aren't you doing what you've always done? So you can't please all of the public. But
Joe,
I applaud them for trying.
Joe, you were talking about the JLA and the Crisis dying in again, the satellite dying again in Crisis, and I know that's something you've held on for all these years.
Look,
I know. I'm not trying to take it away from you, Joe. You can still have it. It's all yours. When Marv Wolfman started to write Crisis, most of the creators were like, "We don't have nothing to do with this." He had to fight him tooth and nail to get involved. Now all of a sudden, towards the middle of the series, he was trying to get all these little references because everybody jumped on the bandwagon. I think it was like number 7 or something, and one of them was just setting up plot points in other book series.
Yeah.
You know, it was hard for him to juggle all these things and do the corporate. And not I'm trying to take away from your JLA, Joe. You can still have that. We're just giving you a different perspective. But I'm curious, do you think that fans now should go back and read the JLA Detroit saga? That whole set of
I hope
stories?
so. I believe a big omnibus is either just about to come out or it just did.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It is also important. This is the end of the Justice League run.
yeah,
Yes.
This is the end of a decades-long run.
and we may get to it, or the final 4 issues or 3 issues where J.M. came in and shut it down. Wow. It was, I think Jerry Conway decided to leave if this is what we're doing. And DeMatteis, who was going to be involved in the new thing, was morbid and gross and mean. It wasn't like the pleasant send-off.
They destroy the JLA.
Yeah.
I think the last series was actually the end of the JLA and or something like that. It was like the last arc of it.
Yeah.
And I had another.
And I get you make a hard break. And that was the hard break that they didn't make when they changed over to JLA Detroit.
Yeah.
But going back to what you were saying earlier, I do think that it's a fun read. It's like a year and a half, 2 years maybe, I think. But there's stuff in there that, now the big, I think, in addition to Martian Manhunter, Despero getting redone into an actual threat that has been recurred. He has recurred in comics since then.
And you had the last the last JLA JSA crossover also in this
and that was, I remember when the Detroit thing happened and they said we're done with the JLA JSA crossovers, and my first instinct was, this thing can go to hell, I don't care.
Yeah,
but then Crisis was only like a few months later, and then they really like, oh, you think we messed with the JSA? We'll show you. But yeah, there was no reason for there to be a JSA crossover because they didn't know these kids.
Yes.
There was no Earth 2 Vibe, who was big in the 60s with the jitterbug. What am I? Why can I not think of any dances from before I was born?
And let's not even talk about the fact that there soon won't be anyway.
Exactly.
There'll be a JSA for a little while.
Pokey.
Yeah.
The
There'll be a JSA.
on Earth 2 did the hokey pokey.
So
I do appreciate it because the end of the Justice League run was also part of a crossover. It was part of that Legends,
right?
Which was another
it kind of sounds weird to me to make it a Legends crossover. You'd think it would have ended it and not seg it into the new rebooted DC stuff.
Because it ends on, it's the final issue, but it ends on a cliffhanger. It leads into the new Justice League #1.
Yeah.
Just on the last page, there's a last page where John is the only one there and he's shutting it down and he gets an alert, a distress call. And that leads into
you go into.
But having it, I do wonder if they knew it was ending if they hadn't had to work in the crossover, would they have ended it differently? Because the crossover was big on, we're destroying a bunch of stuff. Because Legends was, for a brief thing for those who don't know, Legends was a thing where Darkseid was using his agents on Earth. Glorious Godfrey becomes G. Gordon Godfrey, the talk show host, and they're turning people against the heroes.
Would have been
Legends was the first.
post-crisis.
Everybody's on the same Earth
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, first post-crisis crossover. And that was because that was in the early days of Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman at post-crisis.
Yeah.
It happened for different reasons, but I wish the Justice League, Flash, and even Wonder Woman, who got married at the end of Wonder Woman, the last issue, I wish they all would have ended on more of a high note like they did with Superman. Whatever happened to Superman with Alan Moore and Kurt Swan, I really wish they would have actually did it in a high note instead of just letting it run out of gas.
Give them their happy ending. I thought they had earned their happy ending.
Yeah.
And not all of them got it. Yeah, the Justice League certainly did not.
I fully expected Vibe and Steel to at some point have come back, but they never did. Eventually, they're like New 52, I believe.
Yeah.
And decades, they're like, no, they're dead.
And I think a lot of that had to do with the success of the TV version.
Yeah.
Yeah, now these guys we can do something with these guys on TV. We can bring them back.
Mm-hmm.
And Vibe during the New 52 had his own series for a while, too.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've really done anything. I don't think they've really brought Vibe back in the last year. They brought Vixen back.
It's a while.
They brought Vixen back. They haven't brought Gypsy back, as far as I know. We're going to wrap this up. Bobby, Nash, Joe, Crowe, thank you for talking with me about this overview on Justice League Detroit. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
That was fun. Yes.